I work with 7-figure business owners. I've been in 7-figure practices. I've been in 8-figure practices. I've been in 9-figure practices. That money means nothing. If you can't take time off, if you're resentful, if you can't really sell your practice the way that you would want to sell your practice, if that's you in that boat, and your practice isn't a real asset, please. Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Hello. Welcome to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It is Brandy Mabra, and welcome officially to 2026. So I am super excited for today's episode because I'm going to get you to think proactively going into 2026. I want to make sure that you're set up for success. So we're going to go through the 15 things that you need to think about as we're going into the new year. And what I promise you is that you'll thank me. I promise you I'm going to save you tears and heartache and stress and all the things. And you'll be like, Brandy, thank you so much. So keep listening. Meet me at the end. So that way you can definitely have the 2026 that you envision and the 2026 that you imagine. And so let's do this. Number one thing for you to proactively think about, for you to see, is your leadership becomes the constraint before you realize it. So there's 3 things that happens inside of a business as your business continues to grow. And there's 3 things within this one thing that you have to think about for your mindset. So this is self, for your skill set. And then the third thing is strategy. So a lot of times what happens is as your business continues to grow, your practice continues to grow, at each level of growth, there's a different mindset that you have to have. There's a different skill set that you have to tap into, and there's a different strategy that you have to implement. So I remember when I first got into management, my team was 3 people. And that was just amazing to me because I was like, wow, I have this job and I have these people that report to me. And it was 3 people, 3 whole people. And the skill set that I needed for the 3 people compared to later on in my career, where I had 100 plus team members in 20 locations in C-suite, responsibility, and managers and coordinators and directors and team leads and all the things throughout the years, that skill set was completely different. That mindset was completely different. And the strategies that we had to implement were completely different. So a lot of times what I see from practice owners, from clients, and even me having to check myself is that you get to a new stage of business growth and you have to change how you're thinking, you have to change how you're leading, you have to change what you're implementing, you have to change, your identity, all of those things. And so if you miss one of those 3 areas, then it's going to throw you, your business, your money, all of it off. So it's important for you to understand now that the growth of your practice and team is only as good as what your mindset is, what your skill set is, and the strategies that you're implementing. So that's number 1. Number 2 is being responsible versus being strategic as a practice owner. And so what does that mean? So when you're staying on top of everything, it sounds good, right? It sounds good. You're responsible. You're doing the right thing. You're making sure that the team is good. You're making sure that you're taking accountability and all the things. And so there's a certain point where you have to switch things up. So I think about a couple of different examples. The first example is when you go shopping, right? So me and my significant other will go shopping and I'll be like, hey, babe, can you hold my purse? Can you hold my coat? Can you hold my bag? Can you hold whatever? And he will sit up there and he will say, sure, babe. And then I'll go around the store and I'll buy whatever I want and I'm having the time of my life. And he is sitting there being responsible with all my stuff. He's holding everything. He's holding my purse. He's holding my bag, my coat, all the things, right? And so it sounds good, but I'm having the time of my life and his experience is this kind of sucks. That's one example. The second example that comes to mind for me is when I was in college and we would go out and we had a designated driver. His name was Neil. We loved Neil because Neil meant that we could go out and we could just make bad life choices. And if we wanted to take a shot, we could take a shot. If we wanted to, not think about things, because Neil was sitting at a table in the corner, drinking water, making sure that he was being responsible to making sure that we were getting home that night. The story here is that when you think about this inside of your practice, you being the designated driver or you being the one that's holding all the bags and being the responsible one is actually costing you so much growth, because when you are that person for everything, you're not able to focus on the bigger picture. You're worried, so while your team is out having the time of their lives, sometimes making more money than what you're making, sometimes being able to work a more flexible schedule than what you can, making sure that they are just living it up, and you are just stressed and tired because you're holding all the bags, or you're stressed and tired because you have to sit in a corner and drink water because you're making sure everyone else is good while you are sitting there tired and exhausted, right? So it's important for you to get the lesson that sometimes being the responsible person is not the person that you need to be at different stages of business. Like, your team needs to be there to help you. So instead of you being the one holding everything, you have to be one person's holding the purse, another person's holding the coat, another person's holding the shopping bags, right? So you also have to be, everybody is sitting at the table drinking water and making sure that everybody can make it home okay. So that way there's not just the one designated driver. Your team is driving. They're saying, hey, watch ahead. There's a pothole, or there's a car that's coming, or that light just turned red, or there's a deer, that can shoot out from the country. So it's just really making sure that you're setting yourself up for success and you're being strategic as the owner compared to being the one that's always being responsible. So number 3 is actually tied into number 1. A lot of times why we put ourselves in these positions of wanting to be the designated driver or wanting to be the one that's holding everything is because it feels good to be needed and it feels good to be supportive until you get to a place where you're tired, right? And so when you're needed, we're in healthcare. You're in healthcare. I'm in healthcare. We love helping people. We want to make sure that people are good. We want to make sure that people are well. We like fixing things. We want people to live a healthy and better life. What happens is inside of a practice is we take that same mentality and we want our team to be good. Do you need anything? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Do you feel supported? Like all of those things, and so then it becomes like, no, I got it. You don't need to do it. No, I got it. Oh, you need this? Oh, let me get that for you. Oh, you have a question? Let me answer that question. Absolutely. What questions do you have? Like, let me answer all the questions. And then when you are 50,000 questions in and it's 365 days later, you don't want another question. You definitely don't want another question. More times than not, from my experience, the 50,000th question is the question where you start to realize something's wrong. Like, I want my team to be supported. I want my team to feel like I'm here for them, but it's also costing me. It's costing me time. It's costing me money. It's costing me energy. I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And so there's a fine balance. Like, I remember when I first got into management, I loved it. Leadership, I loved it. I wanted to be there for my team. I wanted to make sure that they knew that they could rely on me. And then I got to a place where, you guys have heard the story. I lost 6 figures of revenue in a month, right? I was working way too many hours. My son was, looking for me one night because I lost him because I fell asleep on the couch and he was sleeping underneath the coffee table instead of me putting him to bed as like a normal bedtime routine. I had slobber going down my face. Lights were fully on, fully dressed. And there was a lot of nights that were like that. And it was because I wanted my team to be supported, but I wasn't supporting myself and I wasn't supporting my family. So it's a balance. So when you think about setting yourself up for 2026, you being helpful, you being supportive, sometimes isn't always the best thing, right? There's a balance to everything. So number 4 is running your practice versus leading your practice. A lot of times people will say, well, I run my practice well. I'm happy you run your practice well. How are you leading your practice? Are you still in the weeds of your practice? Are you truly stepping up as a CEO? Are you thinking like a CEO? When you're running your practice, then there's a difference between being an office manager and being a CEO. So when the beginning part of my career or the early part of my career, I was running practices. It was on my resume. I'm here to run the day-to-day operations. When I got into the C-suite, that responsibility was completely different. Like, I had to set the direction. I had to make sure I was leading. I had to make sure that people understood the assignment. I was no longer able to really run the practice. I had other people who needed to be able to run the practice. My job was to lead the practice. So it goes back to the beginning where we talked about number one, where those three areas are super important. If your mindset isn't shifting and you still think like, I'm running my practice, but you're not leading your practice, you're doing a good job. No, your mindset needs to be reset. If you are saying, I'm not a really great leader, so I feel comfortable making sure that I'm running my practice, I feel comfortable when people see me, they think I'm the office manager, then you need to enhance your skill set, because your team should see you as the leader. Your team should see you as the CEO. Your team should see you as somebody who is setting the direction and the vision of the practice, right? And if you are running your practice and you're not thinking from a CEO seat, then you need to change up the strategy, right? So what do you need to do in order for that practice to really move forward, for your team to feel the leadership that they need in order to do what you've hired them to do? So number 5, as we're moving down this list, is a lot of times as you're navigating through the year, there's 2 things that can happen and for you to be prepared for it. Your best team member could stop being your best asset. And a lot of times this happens where team members either outgrow a position or a position outgrows a team member, right? The practice gets more advanced. The practice needs more. You might have a doer who is a really great doer and they're able to get things done really well. They can work through a checklist, they can do all the tasks, and then all of a sudden, that practice needs something else. So that skill set, same thing as with you in the CEO seat, if that team member's skill set doesn't shift, or if that team member's mindset doesn't shift, or if they don't understand what it means to own something, like own a whole workflow or a process, or they don't understand leadership, then they can become a liability super fast, right? And so there are times where you will have a high performer in one stage of business growth, and then the next stage of business growth, this person can become a middle or low performer. And so part of you enhancing your leadership is so that way you can help your team enhance their skills as well. And sometimes those team members just don't make it through, right? And sometimes they are just not the team that's going to get you to the next stage of business growth. And sometimes those doers don't transition to becoming owners or becoming leaders. So it's important for you to recognize as you're working with your team that this can happen. You can have a team member that's an amazing asset at one stage of business growth and become a complete disaster at the next stage of business growth. So that's number 5. Number 6, which is connected to number 5, is promoting going wrong internally doesn't automatically create leaders. And so when we think about the internal promotion, it goes back to where, again, you have that doer that's doing amazing. You have somebody that maybe is working 20 hours a week. You think, well, if I bump them up to 40 hours a week, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. Or you have somebody who's been with you for a number of years, and then it's like, well, it's time to promote them, or it looks like it's time to promote them. And so you give them this title, but the leadership that they need doesn't work. So I think about, for me, there was a provider that I worked with that was a physician. And she was amazing. She had a really great bedside manner. Patients loved her. She was respected. Her colleagues enjoyed working with her, like the peer alignment, everything else. And so we decided to make her a director. And with that director position, at first it was a really great fit because she had the natural respect of her colleagues. She was a natural go-to for a resource. Her clinical experience was on point. Patients loved her. And then it got to a place where she actually had to lead. And when we think about leadership, the easy part of leadership is when you have a really high performer and they're doing really well. The hard part of leadership is where you have to hold people accountable and you have to start to set expectations because you feel bad, right? So this is what happened with her. She felt bad and she was in a place of, I don't want to hold my peers accountable. I don't want to have these difficult conversations. I don't want to sit up there and tell them that they're not hitting their KPIs or their metrics. I just want to be able to be with my colleagues and have normal conversations with them. And so the leadership position wasn't a good fit. So sometimes you have to dive in deeper before you even promote somebody. And just because, again, somebody is doing really great at one business stage and you think like, oh, I can promote them into the next business stage, sometimes that leadership gap is very prevalent and you can actually end up costing a team member or hurting the practice because of the wrong promotion. So I always suggest, like, here's just for me to go a little bit deeper in this. I always suggest for you to give test projects. I always suggest for you to make sure that the alignment is there. One thing that we didn't do with this provider is we didn't have a deep enough conversation for what do you want to do. When it finally came out, she actually didn't even want to be in leadership. She felt bad. She knew her colleagues needed some help. Her colleagues were pushing her, and it wasn't in alignment with what she wanted for her career. It wasn't in alignment for where she saw the direction of her career and going. It wasn't in alignment for how she could even envision her day to day. She was being a good team member and trying to help out her team, which is why she said yes. If I would have dug deeper and really had the relationship that I needed to have, then I would have never promoted it. I would have never promoted her. So that's just something to really think about before, as you're going throughout the year, if you have somebody who is a really high performer and you think like, oh, they're going to be a really great leader, think twice. Number 7. So the original crew becomes the problem. And so this is, again, this ties in all of these things, if you aren't noticing, are very highly connected and one impacts the other. So just like you have the person who you don't necessarily want to promote because they're a good in one business stage and then you need them to do something different in the next business stage, the exact same thing is for your original crew. So we have clients who have like original crew members who have been with them for sometimes a couple years, 3 or 4 years, or a long, long time. And then they get to a place where they have to change up how they lead. They get to a place where the practice becomes a little bit more sophisticated. They get to a place where that person has to be leveled up and they have to let some folks go. So, and even inside a private practice CEO, for my mastermind, we have clients who come in and have hired people saying one thing. So like if it's one metric, or if it's one expectation, or if it's a schedule, or if it's a pay, all of it. And then they actually come into private practice CEO. We start to dive into their business. We start looking at their budgets. We start looking at what the practice actually needs in order for them to have a true business asset on their hands, in order for them to have the culture that they need in order to get to the next stage of business growth. And they start to see the misalignment with the team that they've hired. And sometimes they have to go back and have what I call reset conversations for, I know I told you this KPI, but actually we need this KPI. I know I said I was going to pay you this much, but actually I can only afford to pay you this much. I know I said that you could work this schedule, but actually I need for you to work this schedule. And it sucks. Like that is such a crappy place to be in. So proactively, if you know that you have your original crew, this is the foundational team members that are with you now, and you already know that you're going to go after more money, more sustainability. I want to be more profitable, or I can't keep working all these hours and I'm tired, then be prepared to lose some folks. Be prepared financially what that impact's going to be. Because from my experience, and I'm a pro at this, usually when I go into a practice, I'm turning team members over just because of the misalignment of vision. The vision that is now there is no longer the vision that was there. And so in order for you to have a practice that has truly good soil, what I call good soil, then your practice has to have the right foundation for team members. And sometimes that is not the original crew that you've hired. And that's the hardest one. I think that out of all these 15 ones, that's probably the hardest one. So number 8 is your leadership still needs you more than they should. So this is for my leadership folks. So if you are close to 7 figures, definitely at 7 figures, 9 10 chances you have a leadership team, or you should, or you need to have leadership team if you don't. When you get to that place, some type of leader. So if it's a supervisor, if it's a team lead, it doesn't necessarily mean, and sometimes it's not appropriate for it to be like a full-blown director. But if you do have these team members, sometimes you're not utilizing them the way that you need to. And sometimes they're using you too much, right? Because they don't have the confidence that they need as leaders. They don't understand the expectations for leaders. If you've never led through leaders, which if you've never had a practice, this is your first time around, and you hire someone, leading through leaders is not the same as having like a normal team member. Like when you have a normal team member, those conversations, it's more or less like, hey, this is the job. You can definitely give them more tasks. They're more of a doer. You might elevate them to being an owner. But when you have a true leader, somebody who is helping you with team expectations, helping you with execution, making sure that the ship is moving the way that it needs to, like all of the things, strategy, helping you get the clarity that you need with vision, and then making sure that the team understands the assignment. That is a true skill set. So a lot of times what happens is, again, going back to the earlier ones, if you promote somebody who isn't ready, or if you don't have the budget to hire somebody who can come in and just know automatically what they need to do, or if you have somebody that does have the expertise, but you don't know how to leverage that expertise, then usually they're going to be escalating things to you that maybe shouldn't be there, right? And so this is where you'll hear, I have a problem, I have a problem, I have a problem. For me, when I first started working with leaders and when I had like my first coordinators, then my natural instinct was to not lead through them. My natural instinct was to kind of tell them what I kind of needed, wasn't to be direct, not to set the expectation. I definitely didn't have a vision. I didn't know, right? Compared to by the time I got to the C-suite and I had, directors and managers and coordinators and team leads, it was easier. The problem is that when your leadership still needs you more than they should, then you can see it in a couple different ways. And so for me, it was the team members would always say, I have a problem, I have a problem, I have a problem. They would escalate things to me inappropriately. I remember there was a team member specifically, she was a clinical support person, and she bypassed her leader and came straight to me. Like, I was sitting in my office, the phone rang, I said, hello. And she's like, hi, I have a problem. And I'm like, oh no, what's your problem? And where's your manager? Like, why are you calling me? She said, no. The manager said for me to call you. And I'm like, oh, okay. The manager wants, like, what do you mean the manager told you to call me? And it was because that manager specifically didn't have the skill set that I needed her to have. She wasn't comfortable with handling problems. She wasn't solution focused. And so her go-to was me, right? And so what she was training her whole team was that I was the person who could make all the decisions. I was the person who was able to handle problems, and she wasn't equipped to handle problems. And so that really was a sign of my lack of leadership, because when you have leaders, part of your job is to make sure that you're mentoring the leaders so they can do the leadership job that they need to do, right? And so that's like the biggest thing that I see is that unless if you've hired somebody and you have the bandwidth where they have 20 years of experience of leading teams, or they've been in different types of leadership positions and they've seen the complexities of leadership, then if that's not them, then you have to train them up, right? So it's important for you to understand that you need to groom your leaders to handle problems like a leader. You need to make sure that your leaders are able to think like a CEO and recognize like this is a problem, but here are already some solutions that I've created for this problem. And actually, I went ahead and implemented one of them today, right? And so I'll keep you updated. Like that's how you want them to think. If they're not thinking that way, then you need to work with your leaders, which brings me to number 9. So when delegation isn't giving you the freedom that you thought it would, and you more or less are in a place where I'm delegating, I'm getting things off my plate, I've handed things out, but what's happening is that things are coming back to you. So I always say delegation is easy. You can give anybody a task. Here's a task. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to do it well. It doesn't mean that they're in a place where they actually have the skill set that they need or the strengths that they need to complete the task. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to get it done just because you gave it to them. Delegation will fail without role clarity, ownerships, and systems. So that's number one. The story that really comes up for me is, I got to a place where I could literally call myself a delegation queen. So I would get everything off. It sounded easy. And I would just hand things over, right? Until it got to a place where delegation for me became more challenging, more difficult. And even going back to the leadership piece of it, if the person that you're delegating to doesn't have the foundational skill set that you need them to have, or has never been able to work on the type of assignment that you need to give. So having a team member who is a doer and I'm trying to hand over something that someone needs a leadership skill set for, it's probably not going to go well, right? So delegation is an art. It's not a science. There is 7 steps to delegation that every single client that works with me should know. I know even for some clients that maybe are listening to this, then I always recommend, especially when delegation is hard, for them to have the 7 steps like hanging up in their office. So that way they know, starting off with number 1 is if your team member doesn't have the strengths that is required, or if you don't know what their weaknesses are, then I guarantee you that whatever you delegate is going to come back. Like, it's either going to come back because you don't have the patience to actually let them learn on how to do it. It's going to come back because they don't even have the clarity that they need or the skill set that they need to complete it. Or it's going to come back because they've tried it, they completely messed it up, and now it ends up back on your plate. So there's a difference, because there is something where people will say, oh, well, if you delegate it, and you give them like the procedure, or if you give them the SOP, or you have the policy or whatever, then it should be fine. Or if it's, 80% is like the best thing. Well, if they can't even get to the 80% because you gave it to the wrong person, then that is a real thing, right? So sometimes it's like, well, I'm not expecting perfection, but I'm expecting something. But baseline, foundationally, if they don't even have what's appropriate, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So some of it is like, again, when you're delegating, pay attention to your team collectively. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Who's good at what? This is where I always recommend growth plans. So if you know that somebody wants to grow into leadership, for an example, then you could delegate something to them that a leader would do, but you're delegating it to them with a plan. You're delegating it to them with training. You're delegating with them explaining, because I know you want to be a leader one day, then I'm going to give you this project, right? So you have to make sure that you're setting yourself up and not just throwing out tasks to people because I'm trying to get rid of this one thing, or I'm just trying to get it off my plate, because that doesn't save you time. That just causes more headaches and more heartaches and more tears and more hours and money lost and all the things. So delegation might not just be giving you the freedom, and that's what you need to pay attention to. Number 10 is systems you create don't stick when you pick the right tools. And so the number one thing I always say is like, oh, we have a system for that. I'll hear that. We have a system for that. We have a system for that. I'll ask, like, do you have policy and procedures? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have policy and procedures. You have SOPs? Yes, we have standard operating procedures. We have standard operating procedures. Yes. Okay. Some folks will even be like, yeah, we have a whole hub. We have a resource hub, everything. But here's the problem. The consistency of holding your team accountable to that isn't happening. So you can document things until the cows come home. Like I said, you can record things, you can write things down, you could get a really great tool like Scribe, you could use ChatGPT, you could have we have this really great SOP template, and our team is fully prepared, you can have all the manuals, all the guides, all the protocols, all the stuff. But if you are not holding your team accountable to it, if you are not consistent with making them use it, then it just sounds good, right? And so making sure that if you create a system, if you are saying this is what our process is, this is our way of doing things, and then your conversations have to reiterate that. Your meetings need to reiterate that. Your focuses need to reiterate that. You can't answer a question. What I always say is I dare you not to answer a question. Because when you don't answer the question, then you're reiterating the fact that you have a system for something. So your system is only as good as the accountability that you use. If you aren't holding your team accountable to it, then it won't happen. Number 11 is everything still runs through you. So this is all about decisions. So all the decisions are on your plate. All the approvals are through you. You say yes, you say no, you say maybe, everything is through you, and that is exhausting. So decision fatigue is a real thing. I remember where my name, was just said like 50 million times in a day. And Brandy, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you want to do about this? And so then when I would get home and somebody would ask me like, what do you want to eat? I don't know. I have no idea. I make decisions all day. I don't know what I want to eat. I can't even tell you. I think I need to eat. And that's what happens, right? It's like the decision fatigue is real. So one of the things like for our clients, our clients have what's called a decision tree matrix. And so this is where every position knows inside of your practice what decision that they can make and what decision they can't make. Even your admin person has some type of decision rights, all the way up to leadership. When you have leaders on your team, the decisions that they can make are higher level. There's usually a higher amount of money that they can approve, for an example, compared to your admin person should be able to make some type of decision. So if it's within protocols of rescheduling somebody or protocols of when to collect money for like a copay or not to collect money as a copay or deductible, there's decisions that every position can make. Where things fall through the cracks is the team doesn't know that they can make the decision. So this is where they start to ask you questions, or they start asking your leaders questions, or they don't ask the question. And then all you see is a broken system, or all you see is money not in the bank, or all you see is a patient complaint on Google. And it's because of the lack of decisions and everything having to run through you. So you are the biggest bottleneck when it comes to your practice as you continue to grow. And so you have to find ways to be able to not just delegate tasks. So even going back to the delegation conversation, you have to find a way to be able to delegate decisions. When you can delegate decisions, then that makes things so much easier. Which brings us to number 12. So if your practice doesn't function when you're not there, then what's the point? What is the point? I had to learn this the hard way. For me, I didn't take a vacation for 2 years. And I remember, and there's like a slide presentation that I have for, like, I presented every single like class. So we have Own Your CEO Status Masterclass that's getting ready to come up. And even with that, like one of the slides is me ziplining through Jamaica, and it's after 2 years of not taking a vacation. So my hands were down. I was free as a bird. I felt so good. And it was because my practice had finally gotten to a place where it could function without me. But for 2 years, I didn't see it. I couldn't step away. Every decision ran through me. So it goes back to what we were talking about. My leaders were not confident. And so because of that, then my practice could not function without me there. So if I stepped away, then the practice was in trouble. So it goes back to, my son being underneath the coffee table and me having to wake up in the middle of the night with my clothes still on and lights all on and slobber down my throat, down the side of my mouth. It was because my practice couldn't function without me being there. So you can't function like that. You can't sustain that. And it's just a tragedy waiting to happen. So that's number 12. Number 13 is, when we think about money, is that if you have aspirations of, I want to make more money, I want to make more money, I'm going to tell you that's great. That's lovely. That's fantastic. We have clients who make more money all the time. So, like at this point in time, we have clients who are wrapping up the year making $500,000 more than what they made the year before, $100,000 more of profit, 150% more of profit. However, I never get wrapped up in that. I want you to make more money, but your revenue is only one pillar of your whole business. If your practice isn't profitable or you don't have enough profit coming in, or if the revenue looks good, but it's like the whole practice isn't efficient, it's not effective, it's not well oiled, then a lot of times money coming in can cloud the judgment of the owner because you think, oh, well, money's there. Money's in the bank account. Everything's great. But if your team sucks, or if they're not happy, or if they're not in alignment, or they don't feel seen, or they don't feel safe, or the business culture is what I'm saying isn't good, the turnover is crazy, right? All of that, you're tired, you're exhausted, you're not taking care of yourself. The practice feels like it's an asset when really it's a liability, all because of the amount of money that's coming in. So I'll talk freely like, oh yeah, you want to make more money? Come inside, come work with me. I'll help you make more money. Absolutely. But one of the things that I don't want is I never want a client to make more money and for them to still feel broke. And that's what happens. So the revenue is just a vanity metric. I'm going to say that again. A revenue is a vanity metric. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. Everybody wants to have a 7-figure business. Everybody wants to make sure that they're achieving that level of success. I work with 7-figure business owners. I've been in 7-figure practices. I've been in 8-figure practices. I've been in 9-figure practices. That money means nothing. If you can't take time off, if you're resentful, if you can't really sell your practice the way that you would want to sell your practice, if that's you in that boat, and your practice isn't a real asset, please, like I'm always looking at, are your schedules filled? Is your team happy? Are they engaged? Do you feel like if you could leave your practice for a month and for things not to fall apart, do you walk in and you have all the problems, all the emails, the Slack is like ding, 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 ding all the time? That's not freedom. That is not freedom. So the revenue means nothing. For number 14, so we're getting close to the end, is staying where you are on purpose when you have the desire to scale feels riskier than staying small. So what does that mean? So really it means that the instability of scaling feels scary. And at every single step of business growth, when you get to whatever you've envisioned for yourself, there's a choice that you have to make. Does the vision get bigger, or are you good with where you're at? What I find is that when you're a high performer or you're ambitious, sometimes you're chasing, right? So the vision does get bigger. Sometimes there's an aspiration that you have. Maybe there's a stage that you want to speak on. Maybe there's a book that you want to write. Maybe there's another location that you want to open. Maybe you have the desire to have a global impact compared to a local impact. None of this is right or wrong. What is wrong is that when you decide, I'm not going to go after what I really want because scaling feels like instability. It feels like I can't afford to do it. It feels like that I'm not going to be able to get there, or the amount of money or the amount of time feels riskier, so I would just rather stay small. I know for me in my career, and especially with the work that I do now, I left a really, really, really well-to-do 6-figure salary, a very stable situation to be able to help and make a bigger difference in the work that I do now. And I don't regret it one bit. So I left a stable job to take a leap, right? And even with higher positions, taking a leap. And so it's very similar when, and even for me in my own business, there's different stages of business growth that I'm trying to get to. And there's the next aspiration and all the things. And so what I do know is that the vision that you have and that you're sitting with is for you. And I promise you, when you actually take the leap and when you decide to, I'm going to scale, I'm going to open up the second location, I'm going to open up the third location, I'm going to go ahead and do a global impact, I'm going to go ahead and speak on the stage, I'm going to go ahead and write the book. then there's freedom that comes with that, because you're entering into the vision that you've been given, and you are living out the purpose that you've been given. And that alignment is priceless. So when you're sitting there and you feel there has to be more than this, or you're sitting there and you're thinking, this is not what I signed up for, or this just doesn't bring me joy. Not saying that all days are going to be sunshine and unicorns and rainbows, but if you were sitting there most days and you're waking up and you're miserable, it's because you're out of alignment. And it's because you're out of alignment with that vision and that purpose that you've been given. So part of this is for you to decide if you really want to scale, if you really want to go to that next stage of business growth, and that's what you want for yourself, then go after it. So I promise you, when you do it, then every resource that you need will definitely show up for you. You'll be more happy, you'll be more fulfilled, and you won't feel like you're playing small. You won't feel like you wake up and you're looking at like, whose life is this? This is in the bad way, like that will not be your plight. So, which brings us to number 15, the last one. So when we think about true freedom inside of your practice, and when you think about how you want to end 2026, then there are 3 things that have to be in alignment. And so if they are out of alignment, this is what you need to look at proactively. Your leadership has to be in alignment with your team. Your team has to be in alignment with what the practice needs. And your operations have to be on point. When all those 3 things are in alignment, which means that you're showing up as an empowered leader, your team is engaged, and your operations make sense, then this is where real freedom happens. So what I teach is the freedom formula. And so with our clients, they work through the freedom formula. And so there's 5 areas that you have to pay attention to when it comes to the freedom formula. There's the vision. So you have to be super clear on the vision. So when you think about the alignment, you have to be the one to set the direction. Your team has to have the synergy. So that means that they're all working together. So there's no such thing as, well, they're admin and they're the provider and that's billing. No, it's like one unit collectively is all moving towards the same goal. There is no silos within the practice. Everybody understands the assignment, and everybody understands how their piece affects like the whole pie. That's the team synergy. The third area is a culture of accountability. If your practice does not have a culture of accountability, if you are not holding people accountable, if you are just letting people do mediocre work inside of your practice and you're expecting to hold on to high performers, good luck, right? High performers, which is what you want inside of your practice, love cultures of accountability because they're not being held to or cleaning up somebody else's mess because of incompetence from your lower performers. So the culture of accountability, I cannot say that enough. The 4th area that you have to pay attention to is profitable metrics. If you don't have the amount of profit that you need inside of your practice, again, the revenue does not matter, right? So those metrics that you're monitoring or the metrics that your practice is using as like the North Star or what your team is being held accountable to, they need to put the practice in a place of not just financial health, but also when we think about what makes a practice really healthy, then it comes down to it being well-oiled, healthy team culture, empowered leadership, like all of it. And so those metrics matter. So your KPIs that you're monitoring are super important. If you are going into 2026 and your team members don't know what their KPIs are, their key performance indicators, or what they're being held accountable to, or what it looks like to be successful inside of your practice, you're already losing. I promise you that, right? And so you're going to end the year frustrated, tired, and stressed. This is the type of specificity that it takes in order to have a practice that makes sense. Number 5 of the freedom formula is flowing workflows. That means that everything makes sense when it comes to your systems, when it comes to your processes, when it comes to how things are all connected within your practice, then things need to flow, right? And so sometimes you'll get to a next stage of business growth and you'll break your business. The workflow will break. There's a difference between, okay, we really tested the business and we broke the workflow, And now we need to fix it. And you need to fix it compared to, nope, things are just happening. We're just going through the motions. And I have no idea why things aren't working. So those 5 areas, when they are on point, and when the actual CEO and the owner is paying attention to those areas, your team understands those areas, your leadership team understands those areas, that is where real freedom happens. And that is where our clients work less hours. That is where they make more money. That is where, and when I say more money, I mean like real money, not just revenue. This is where they actually feel like they can take a break. And this is where they really feel that their practice is an asset and not just something that they're just working in day to day. So the lesson here is that real freedom is available to you if you decide to go after it, right? If you decide to be stressed and work in a chaotic practice, or if your practice is a hot mess, then I can't help you with that. So this podcast is loaded with 15 things, 15. So if you need to go back, if you need to write down notes, if you need to, listen to it a couple of times, definitely do it. But these are the 15 things that if you proactively look at and you proactively think about, then you're going to be set up for success when it comes to 2026. And of course, if you need help, then I'm here for you. So there's 2 ways I'm going to tell you that I can work with you. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you're like, you know what? I really, really need help. I really do. Then I want you to join the Own Your CEO Status Challenge, which is all about you going after freedom. So for 5 days, I'll teach you exactly what you need to have more freedom inside of your practice. Not just fluff and making more money, but really like true freedom, where the freedom formula will help you implement that. If you are in the place where, Brandy, I don't even know you. This is like my first podcast episode. I don't know you. You sound good, but whatever. Then come to the Own Your CEO Status Masterclass. And so we are having one that's coming up very soon. And so I would love for you to join me there. So either way, the challenge or the masterclass are both happening. And you can go ahead and see the show notes, or if you're watching this, and you can see the comments below in order to sign up today. All right, that's all I got for you. So welcome to 2026. I hope these 15 things help you. I don't know if I'll ever talk about 15 things again, but I hope that the 15 things help you, and I hope that you're able to have an excellent start to your new year. All right, bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.